But we'll go right into our brilliant guest tonight. L.A. Marzulli is the author of the Nephilim trilogy, also policy, politics, supernatural. I think I got that. I'm sorry if I messed that up, but and he made the Nephilim trilogy, made the CBA bestsellers list, and continues to thrill readers a decade after the first book in the series was published. Marzulli received an honorary doctorate from the Pacific International University for his work on the Nephilim trilogy. He's also the author. Let me get this straight: politics, prophecy, and the supernatural. Redeem myself a little bit. And that was a great book. And now his latest offering is basically the Alien Interviews, which he had been kind enough to send us a copy that we read, and it was very good. Let's see here. And how are you doing tonight, Mr. Marzulli?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, guys. Be here. And the Alien Interviews is now available in paperback, and we're selling them like hotcakes out of here. It really opens up the window to the UFO phenomena, and leaves it up to the reader to decide what we're looking at here.
It's a very, very good book. I will say I heartily recommend it to any of our listeners. Thank you. Is there anything else new you got coming down the pipe, or is?
Well, I'm actually working on a 2012 book right now. I'm in the process of writing and researching it. The research is almost done, and I've actually written about 60, 70 pages and pushing it forward every day. So that'll be available sometime towards the fall, more than likely.
I greatly look forward to that. I'm very interested in reading your take on that. I really enjoy your take on things, especially with the Alien Interviews and sort of getting into.
Appreciate that.
And when you kind of get into sort of the weirder side of things. I would say weirder anyway. I guess we'll kind of start the conversation tonight and just sort of, a big plan, I think, and a big overarching theme in a lot of your books that I've seen is sort of an in-game scenario. Would you like to kind of bring our listeners in sort of on that?
Sure, I'd love to. First of all, what we're looking at, in my opinion, is our interdimensional beings that are manifesting in our dimension. And, I've talked to different people on different sides of the aisle. What I mean by that is people that believe that they're extraterrestrials and that they're from the planet Pleiades, and maybe even that they genetically manipulated us thousands of years ago. There's a lot of different positions people take with the UFO phenomena. What's interesting to me is that when you say, well, what about the cattle mutilations? Or what about the abductions? And people say immediately, well, we do that to cows here. We tag cows and shoot them with tranquilizers and do things like that. So, we're probably on the evolutionary chain similar to where cows are to humans as we are to the aliens. So that's how they get by it. Well, the moment I bring up to them, what about the human mutilations? And there are records of human beings being mutilated in similar fashions that the cattle are being mutilated. All of a sudden, all bets are off the table completely. People are looking at the phenomena now in a whole different light. It has gone very, very destructive, and that's what I see. These entities move in an atmosphere of fear. They try to create as much fear as they possibly can. Let's just take a typical scenario of the abduction phenomena scenario, where you're laying in bed at night, and all of a sudden you're awakened because you have this feeling of a presence in the room. You're startled, you awaken, you find that you're completely paralyzed. Next to the bed are standing, 4 to 6 little gray-like creatures with elongated arms, large heads, huge black eyes that almost wrap around the skull. You try to scream, you can't. You find that your partner or your husband or wife, they're not moving either. To your absolute horror, you find yourself floating above the room, and then you're floated out of your room through windows, doors, walls, the whole deal, which of course defies our physics. So we're looking at entities that do these things, and they're nefarious. You're conscious through the whole thing, and these entities, I believe, are feeding off that fear. What's interesting is that the world is at a point globally where, and people can say I'm a doom and gloomer all they want, 10% unemployment in this country, over 3 million foreclosures with a $12 trillion debt, which we've now harnessed. The Middle East is literally ready to blow. Khomeini just this week talked about once again that the Zionist regime, i.e. Israel, would no longer be an entity in the not too distant future once the Muslim nations gathered together. So we see that the winds of war are definitely blowing in the Middle East, and that these, in my opinion, it's going to be sooner than later. And this has been prophesied actually in the guidebook of the supernatural, i.e., what most people realize or call the Bible. But I prefer to call it the guidebook to the supernatural because, in fact, that's really what it is. And it gives us glimpses into the future. And one of the glimpses is this horrific war towards the last days. The world is looking for a savior. How do I know that? I'll tell you. When the 2008 election happened, Obama Messiah. I mean, that's what we heard. And this country looked to him to bring change, that he had the answers. Well, let's ratchet it up. Let's up the ante. What if there is a war in the Middle East and we see some sort of nuclear exchange? What if there are dirty bombs that go off in this country? The world will be clamoring for some sort of messianic type savior. Someone, please make sense of all this so we don't annihilate ourselves. And the world will welcome this type of a figure. Well, this is what I write about in Politics, Prophecy, and the Supernatural, which is the subtitle of the book, The Coming Great Deception and the Luciferian Endgame. What I mean by that is this is a perfect time for the Luciferians to manifest in full regalia with 2 to 3 mile wide chips over the cities of the world. And we have to realize something, that when this happens, not if, when this happens, from my little perspective where I am, when this happens, 2 mile, 3 mile wide crafts hovering over the cities, if you don't have your worldview down rock solid and you don't know what you're looking at, you will be deceived. You will be overwhelmed by what is manifesting in the skies. Ricky Sorrell, who I interviewed for the Alien Interviews, for instance, perfect example of what I'm talking about. Here's a guy out deer hunting, minding his own business. It's around January 1st. He's got his gun. He's out in the backwoods where he lives in Texas, out deer hunting. All of a sudden, he has a feeling like there's something overhead. He looks up, and there's this enormous craft. In fact, it's so enormous, he looks in all directions, and he cannot see the edge of the craft. This is not a little silver disc from the 50s that's about 60 feet wide. This is something that he estimates well over a mile wide. And it's hovering right over the treetops. Now, I spoke to Mr. Sorrells. He came on the record in the Alien Interview book. It's a riveting interview. And he was overwhelmed by the experience. He's still trying to sort out what it was that he was looking at. I sent him my books. I haven't spoken to him in a while. Probably should call him again just to follow up and see how he's doing. But that's my point. Once it happens, it's like a tidal wave. It just sweeps you. It sweeps you intellectually off your feet. It sweeps any religious ties that you may have right away. Unless a person is rooted and grounded and understands that this is the coming great deception, that the guidebook of the supernatural warns us about, they will be swept away by the tidal wave, by the tsunami of the deception.
Mm-hmm. And it's funny you should kind of mention those things. Is it's incredibly dorky, I know, but one of the first things I thought about when I heard about the earthquake in Haiti was your show on Coast to Coast about a month prior, about how you were kind of saying, hey, this is coming. And it's one of the first things I thought about. And it makes you really wonder, how very close we are to maybe something like this happening. And I can tell you, just being in the field we are in, that something's coming. It's you just kind of have this feeling in your gut that something's coming to a boiling point.
I agree. I couldn't agree more. And when I was on Coast December 1st, I told George, I said, George, earthquakes are increasing. Earthquakes, the frequency of earthquakes and the severity of earthquakes have basically doubled since 1982, from 14,000 to 32,000 in 2008. So, something is going on. And if that was the only thing, you'd say, well, okay, maybe it's cyclical, we're looking at something. But what we see is that everything seems to be accelerating. What I mean by everything is everything supernatural, paranormal. And let's define these terms. To me, paranormal and supernatural go hand in hand. I mean, there's no difference between the two. When we see a ghost, You may call it paranormal. I'll call it supernatural. We're seeing a ghost. The question is, what paradigm best explains the so-called apparition of what we're seeing? Now, I'm diverging here a little bit, but I just want to clear up those terms for your listeners.
Please.
So we're seeing an increase, a burgeoning of cattle mutilations, alien abductions, crop circles. UFO sightings right now are flipping through the roof. And then you get all this other strange, high strangeness, as Linda Moulton Howe likes to call it. But it is, and I think it's a great term. We see all this high strangeness. It's not going away. And the whole point of the Alien Interviews book, if I could just touch back to that real quick, is there's a lot of listeners out there who may know something about the UFO phenomena but haven't really studied it. This book will serve as a primer. It'll get you up to speed. If you understand it, that's great. But if you've got friends that don't, buy some copies and give it to them, or buy one copy and pass that puppy around, because people need to understand that the phenomena is burgeoning. It's real, burgeoning, and not going away. It is real, it is burgeoning, it's increasing, and not going away. If we had 1 or 2 sightings a year, and we had a couple of crop circles, we'd all laugh and business as usual. It's not the case. The phenomena is ratcheting up towards what I believe some sort of a climax, and you just basically stated that is a gut feeling that we're on the verge of something, we're on the cusp of something. Look, the Norway Lights, no one really knows what that was. Oh yeah, the Russian said it was a missile. Well, okay, then why is there a blue beam which seems to be emanating from the ground pointing up to the center of the spiral? And then why is it that the center of the spiral looks like a black hole with no stars in it? I mean, explain that. And where is the debris from the rocket? And on and on and on. And then you get this strange stuff in Haiti. I blogged about this last week. Where's the tsunami? Why isn't the Dominican Republic, which is on the other side of the island, why aren't they destroyed? Why is it just in Haiti? Why is all this billions of dollars pledged in aid? There's only about 9 million people, 8.5 million people on the island of Haiti. With the aid that's pouring into Haiti, and I'm not making this stuff up, do the math. Billions of dollars are pouring into Haiti. It's enough to give every person on the island $1 million, literally. Literally. What are we looking at here? According to some reports, right before the earthquake, 2 days prior, the British fleet moved out of the area. According to some researchers, the British fleet has had a presence in the Caribbean, near the Bahamas, in that area since the 1700s. And now all of a sudden the fleet packs up and moves away? Why is the response to this earthquake? I mean, look at the devastation in Katrina that happened, and we were slow to move. All of a sudden we've got 20,000 troops on the ground in Haiti. I mean, what are we looking at? What is going on here? And I'm just one guy. I don't know, but I find it extremely weird. And then you get the H1N1 stuff that's happening, and everybody's got to get this flu shot, and this thing's going to be a pandemic, and millions might die, blah blah blah. And like all flus, some people do die from it, but it's certainly not this pandemic that we were scared with during the summer and during the spring. That hasn't manifested. And then you get these ridiculous sightings of UFOs, 2-3 mile wide craft, pyramidal shapes over Moscow allegedly, 3 mile wide craft seen in China for like hours in broad daylight, and people have fuzzy video film of it, but it's there. And then of course the crop circles and the cattle mutilations, which are ongoing in Colorado and New Mexico. They're not going away. And when I interviewed Chuck Dukowski on my own radio program, and also he came on the news magazine, riveting interview, he said that, look, this phenomenon has been going on for decades, and law enforcement has yet to arrest anyone. I mean, decades, 30 years, and law enforcement has yet to arrest anyone. And the bottom line is, these entities move with impunity in our skies. They come and go as they please with complete impunity. They take what they want with impunity. And they've done it for decades, and they continue to do so. So I believe that we are looking at some sort of a acceleration. It's ratcheting up to an event. And when it happens, I call it the coming great deception. And that's what I think it will be. And what it will do is it will usher in what I call the alien gospel. The alien gospel is simply this: that so-called extraterrestrials, and remember, I don't believe that they're extraterrestrials. I believe that they're interdimensional beings, i.e. fallen angels, masquerading as such. And we can get into that if you want to, and broaden that idea, that concept a little more if you so desire. But the alien gospel is simply this. One, extraterrestrials created all life on this planet. All life on this planet. Two, they genetically manipulated us and created the Homo sapien, the modern man, more than likely from primitive apes. Three, they began to start civilizations all over the world. Four, they were worshipped by our ancestors as gods. Five, they started the world's great religions. Six, they're back at this critical juncture in human history to usher us in to a new age, a new paradigm. That is the alien gospel. That is the coming great deception. There are already people in the exopolitic movement who echo exactly what I said verbatim. That's what they truly believe. And of course, the guidebook of the supernatural tells us this, that Lucifer, i.e. Satan, and when I say this, you guys got to understand, I'm not talking about some guy in a little red suit. We're talking about a being that's thousands of years old, that's incredibly powerful, and if he were to manifest, you'd fall on your face as if dead, because that's what happens every time these guys manifest on this planet. They short-circuit human beings out. We're no match for them at all. This guy is incredibly powerful. So this idea of these entities manifesting on the planet, this is the great deception. This is the coming great deception. And the guidebook of the supernatural tells us that in the latter days that men will faint from fear from what is coming on the earth. That's pretty specific. Men fainting from fear from what is coming on the earth. That even the elect would be deceived if that were possible. That all signs and lying wonders will begin to manifest. I mean, I just gave you three, very, very pregnant and poignant statements from the guidebook of the supernatural. It seems like in the last days, which I believe we're in, we're going to be seeing stuff like this. And frankly, folks, that's what we're seeing. That's what is manifesting.
And we kind of have that scenario, and I'm right on board with you because of, our experiences and what we've seen personally. And, like you always say, if you don't believe me, check out the research yourself. And, of course we've done that, and it's there. I mean, it's absolutely there. And, I have a Christian faith as well. So I believe, I agree with you. And as far as the book of Revelation goes, as far as the other books in the Bibles that mention this as well. And, I think bottom line and what a lot of people want to know now is, they're on board with you. Well, what do we do?
Well, and that's a really good question. The first thing we need to do is to make sure that, we have come to an acceptance and an understanding of what the events of 2,000 years ago did for us at the blood sacrifice on Calvary by the God-man Yahshua, or Jesus, as we commonly refer to him. And, look, when this guy walked the earth, when he walked the earth, and I say God with all due respect, I'm just using, the slang, the vernacular of 21st century America. But when he did walk, so please don't take disrespect for those of you who want to get religious on me. But when he walked the earth, if you had leprosy, and leprosy was a death sentence in the ancient world, we know from the guidebook of the supernatural that it tells us very specifically that they were a group of lepers, 10 lepers, 12 lepers, and I think it's 10. We'll stick with 10. So 10 lepers, and they cry out to him from the crowd because they couldn't mingle in the crowd because they were unclean. They had leprosy, and this was a death sentence in the ancient world. And they cry out and say, "Have mercy on us, Son of David," which is a title, a great title of respect in the ancient world in Jewish circles, Son of David. And we know from his lineage that he was a son of David. He was literally on both sides of his family had a genealogy goes back to the line of David. So he was of the line of David, which is a line of kings. And they cry out to him and they say, Son of David, have mercy on us. And he basically says, go your way, you are healed. Instantaneously, on the cellular level, the molecular cellular level, the leprosy is healed, and they have skin as if new. What are we looking at here? How is this man, this God-man, able to do this? How is he able to just speak it out, and these men are instantly changed on the cellular level? I mean, and instantaneously. The healing doesn't take place over a month or 2 months. It's instantaneous. We're looking at physics, which we know nothing about. We're looking at the manipulation of matter and energy, in which we know nothing about. And this is who he was. So all that to give us a little backdrop of, the idea that we're dealing with an incredibly powerful being, but also when he shed his blood for us on Calvary, that blood sacrifice covers us if we believe. There's two requirements for eternal life. First requirement, all these vampire books, all these vampire movies, it's bogus. You want eternal life, this is what you do. You believe on him who was sent. I'm not talking religion, folks. You believe on him who was sent. Who was sent? Yahshua/Jesus. Same name. Hebrew name is Yahshua. Greek name is Jesus. I'm not talking religion. You believe on him who was sent. Then you believe in the blood sacrifice on Calvary. That his sacrifice, his blood, covers us from our sins, from the things that we do, and that's it. We have eternal life. If we believe those things and ask him in, he will come in and fellowship with us, and we will have eternal life. Now, everything else on top of that is gravy. And unfortunately, religion has obfuscated the simple clarity of the gospel/good news, because that's all gospel means, good news. And it's obfuscated that simple, very, very simple dynamic. And yet, from that dynamic, most people have a real hard time with what I just said, those two requirements: accepting him who was sent as the Messiah and believing that their sins are forgiven by his blood. So that's the first step we need to do. The second step we need to do is be practical. If the currency, in my opinion, is going to tank. I don't know when, but it's going to tank. If we put all our money in gold and silver, it's not going to buy you anything if some sort of catastrophic event happens to, let's say, the United States of America. Here's a couple of scenarios. What if the Ezekiel War actually happens and there's this war in the Middle East? In Politics, Prophecy, and Supernatural, I have stated that I believe it's a two-prong attack, that they will detonate dirty bombs in this country. 2, 3, 15 dirty bombs in this country. You say, well, how could that possibly be? Well, the southern border has remained porous until very recently. The drug wars that are happening right now in Mexico are because there's a chokehold on the border. The fence is almost completed. I think it's down to about 50 miles, a 50-mile opening. So the drug kingpins, the drug lords, can no longer get their stuff across the border in the same fashion that they did before the fence was constructed. So they're losing millions of dollars. They don't like this. There are, I think 2 weeks ago, there was a record of 65 people shot in one day in one of the border towns. That's more people killed than in Iraq and Afghanistan together in a day. So it gives you an idea that there is a war on the border. Why the border was porous before the fence was erected. The fence very slowly was erected in the last 8 years since 9/11, and last 9 years since 9/11. It's still not completed yet, so that's what our federal government does with a fence. Imagine what they do with health care, but I digress. Why the border was open and porous, very easy to slip dirty nukes in here. Suitcase nukes, they're the size of a suitcase. Just drive it across on a back road and embed it in some city and leave it there until your handlers tell you to go for it. And then you detonate it and you wipe out, certainly it's not like a nuclear device, but it's a dirty nuke. And you wipe out a city where the people can't go back in for years and years and years, like Chernobyl, just like Chernobyl. It contaminates everything. It's radioactive, and that's it. Imagine one in L.A. What the heck would happen with 9 million people around here? What the heck would happen in L.A.? Mass exodus. Hollywood shuts down. I mean, it's just, God forbid. But if we get into some sort of a scenario like that, the best thing, I would suggest 3 things. First thing is stockpile food. We all need to stockpile food. We're crazy if we don't stockpile food. And people go, oh, you're hoarding. Baloney. Look, before the Industrial Revolution, there were refrigerators. That's how everyone lived. They lived from season to season. They stockpiled food, for the winter. They would plant again in the spring, and they had to wait till the harvest came in, because the harvest had to hold them over to the following year. Okay, the modern world is different. We have enough food. We have everything canned. Have 4 to 6 months worth of food. Buy a bunch of seeds. Start your garden. Learn how to grow crops, because you may have to do that. Have a good supply of water. have people around you that are like-minded, that you can sort of create a little group of people. If it really gets down to that, hopefully it won't, but if it gets down to that, we need to be prepared. Look, Katrina happened, and we saw the response to the federal government. Nothing. Dragged their heels. No one knew what to do. And folks, it's you're crazy. We're crazy if we don't have 4 to 6 months worth of food. You should also buy a firearm. We need to understand that if it just like Katrina, the rule of law in a situation like that, the first thing that goes is the rule of law, and the rule of law is only upheld because of the police force. Right? Without a police force, there is no rule of law. Citizens immediately have a great proclivity to lean towards chaos, disorder, and anarchy. That's where it goes, and we saw that with Katrina, and we see it now with Haiti, and many other places where we've had disasters. We need to understand that our Constitution allows us to defend ourselves, to right to bear arms, and it's a very important right. If you're not sure, afraid of guns, they'll take a firearm class. It costs you about $60. They'll take you through the handguns and some rifles. You get to shoot them. Figure out that this is a weapon, just like a knife. You can kill somebody with a butcher knife, right? And everybody's got butcher knives in their homes. So this is just another weapon that we have, but it enables me to defend my family, and I have a weapon. I'm not ashamed to say it, and I, don't tout it around. Don't tell a lot of people that I have it, but I can protect my family if I have to. And these are just simple, basic procedures that Americans should be taking in the event, God forbid, that anything happened on our shores.
Yes, sir. And another interesting thing that I know has been brought up is that when you kind of go further into the abduction scenario, that several times, I'm not sure it's worked in all cases, and maybe you can enlighten us on that if you kind of have more of a better understanding than I do. But the application of spiritual warfare during this abduction scenario has prevented it sometimes.
Well, the whole idea of the abduction scenario, the abduction phenomena, is certainly seems to be ongoing. And what we see with that is that people are able to stop the abductions. Joe Jordan has done extensive research on this. Other people have too. By evoking the name of Jesus during the abduction, it seems to stop. It stops it cold. He's got over 300 people that he's brought out of the abduction phenomena by doing that. So it's not a magic incantation like Open Sesame. There's a connection. But this gets into spiritual warfare. It gets into what the guidebook to the supernatural tells us about. And I would challenge your listeners, if they haven't cracked one open, and it's not easy to just pick it up and look for those things. You gotta know where the guidebook talks about spiritual warfare in order to find the passage that will teach us how to sort of weaponize ourselves against these entities. And of course, the work of Joe Jordan and others are able to do that.
Yes, sir. We've kind of come to, again, going into the in-game scenario where talks of the Antichrist has become pretty much rampant. People are like, is he on the scene? Is he not? Who do you think it is? People, are bringing up various things. And you have Benjamin Krim, of course, which everyone kind of brings up the Maitreya, in the same breath as Antichrist anymore. And, do you have any personal opinions on that?
On Maitreya?
Well, in the Antichrist question in general.
Well, I think he's alive. I think he's a hybrid. I think he's a Nephilim, in my opinion. Last night on my show, I had Doug Riggs on, and we talked about satanic ritual abuse. And one of the points that we were talking about is in the Book of Revelation. It says that the angels gather up the beast and the Antichrist and the false prophet and throw them all in the lake of fire. There's no judgment. So that leads us to believe, and I'm down with this, with what Doug has come up with, that whoever these beings are, they're not totally human. In other words, they're hybrids. They're the product of fallen angels and the Women of Earth. Interestingly enough, there's an author by the name of G.H. Pember who wrote a book called Earth's Earliest Ages way back in 1867, and Pember is talking about exactly this very thing. I mean, literally, verbatim, talking about this very, very exact phenomena that we're looking at. And I want to just read something if I can. It thus appears that this is from Earth's Earliest Ages. It does, and again, this is written in 18. Let me see if I can find it here. Oh well, it's not in the front of the book, which is sort of weird. But I know I had it notated somewhere else. Yeah, 1876. First published in 1876. Mm-hmm. And Pember writes, it thus appears that this long-expected event will precede Satan's banishment from heaven, and therefore also it results in the revelation of the man of sin. Like Enoch, the Church of Christ will be called away before earth is, for a time, abandoned to the Nephilim, before the fearful woes of the end. And, this is 1876. And what are we looking at now with the abduction phenomena? We're looking at hybrids. I mean, Dr. Jacobs, who doesn't know anything from, maybe not anything, let me back up. Dr. Jacobs has a completely different paradigm than I do, and I certainly respect his paradigm, and his worldview. But he knows nothing of, let's say, the passage that I just wrote about. I'm not even sure he knows who the Nephilim really is. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but whether he does or he doesn't, this is to me incredible. 1876, Pember knew the guidebook of the supernatural and is calling out a priori in advance what is about to take place, which is the dwelling once again of this supernatural hybrid called the Nephilim. Dr. Jacobs knows that the breeding program has been going on for decades, and it's vigorous. And the so-called extraterrestrial beings take a great concern with it. They're very concerned about the end game with this hybrid. And so I believe that the hybridization is all around us now. I think that some of them have been integrated into society. No idea how many numbers what we're looking at. Don't want to meet one. But could this be that the Antichrist, the false prophet, and the beast all are Nephilim hybrids? And in my opinion, I would say that that's a very strong possibility.
Mm-hmm. And I would agree with you. Based on that, I could see where that would definitely be a, something that would definitely happen. And while we're talking sort of in that vein, and I know it's sort of a touchy subject for some people, but what role do you think organized religion, and I don't mean just the Christian church, but just sort of organized religion in general will have a role to play in this end game? What role do you think they might play?
Well, we know from the guidebook that tells us very specifically that in the latter days there's going to be a one-world religious system, which immediately begs the question, how do you get 1.6 billion Muslims and 2.1 billion Christians to somehow change their worldview, change their religious affiliation? Well, one way, certainly, would be to manifest the so-called extraterrestrial presence, like we talked about earlier in the show, 2-3 mile wide craft hovering over the cities of the world. Your worldview has just been shattered. What you believe has just been shattered. If you're seeing like the movie V, the television series V, where the bottom of the saucer turns into a screen, whether that's true or not, who knows? But what if you're seeing holographic film, let's say, broadcasting on your television set, and that film that you're seeing is coming from the so-called extraterrestrials, and you see the miracles of the guidebook are actually not supernatural. They're actually being done by ET with UFOs and UFO craft, that all the gods that we worship, all these people that started religions, Moses parting the Red Sea, ET, Joshua walking on the water, ET, Muhammad receiving the Quran, ET. It all goes back to ET. And you see a 3 mile wide craft, what are you going to do? What are you going to believe? And that, my friend, is, in a nutshell, the coming great deception. And that's why I talk about this incessantly, a priori, before it happens. So people, hopefully, when it does, they can go back to this show and hundreds of others that I've done and understand that what they're looking at is part of the great deception. But the problem with this is that most people won't do that. Most people won't really take a good hard look at the evidence and what's going on. So when it comes upon them, and of course the guidebook of the supernatural tells us this, it'll come upon the whole earth like a snare. And that's exactly what it is. You're already caught in the snare. It's too late. Can't get out. You're in the snare. When this thing manifests, it's too late. The only way a person can stand against it, in my opinion, and not be deceived by the phenomena, is to understand ahead of time that what they're looking at. Once it manifests, it's too late. I can't say that enough. Can't warn people enough. Once it manifests, it's all bets are off the table at that point, and you will be literally like Ricky Soros, who came on the record in the alien interviews, and others. You will be overwhelmed by what you see. You will be deceived.
Yes, sir. And just for the listeners that think that maybe LA's version of sort of what's going on is a little far-fetched, I kind of want to remind everybody about what happened with Jacques Vallée, and basically that he came to the conclusion that he started referring to the UFO phenomena as being great deceivers, and basically withdrew from the scene. Yeah, exactly. And and you're not the only one reaching this conclusion in this field by far. And it's not that far-fetched at all. Especially with people that are deep into ufology. And kind of coming off that information, do you think that people that kind of go into ufology, sort of the nuts and bolts side of things, could run just as much into, I guess you'd say, being a target for demonic attention as, say, people that go into ghost hunting?
Well, look, anytime, and this is what people don't understand. The guidebook. I'm actually going to write about this in my 2012 book, which should come out sometime in the fall of 2010. But one of the dynamics I talk about is the fact that the guidebook of the supernatural tells us very specifically not to get involved with beings from this dimension. It warns us, and it's like people go, "Oh, the guidebook is just trying to keep us from having power and fun." Baloney. The guidebook is trying to save our rear end. Is what it's trying to do. We're not equipped to deal with these entities. We're not. We're not equipped to deal with them. And I can't stress that enough. We're not equipped. We're just not equipped. I can't say it any plainer than that. We don't have the wherewithal to stand up to these entities. We have no idea what we're dealing with. A good example of that would be that in throughout the guidebook of the supernatural, anytime the good angels, the good angelos means messenger, by the way, the good messengers come and appear, people fall down as if dead instantly, all throughout. Thousands of years of recording occurrences, they all fell down as if dead. And the angels always come up and go, "Peace, be of good cheer, stand up, it's okay, pat you on the back, come on, raise up." They're always speaking good things because they know just by showing up, they short circuit us out. They don't mean to, but they do. And so that's why we're not, at least at this particular moment in time, we're warned not to venture in to that dimension. But Nostradamus, Edgar Casey, Boston Goodchild, the Hopi Indians, the shamans all over the globe, the Mayans, all do exactly that. They sort of break the barriers illegally through a variety of substances or chanting or meditative skills, and they're able to break into that particular dimension. Where we're warned very specifically that we're not equipped in that arena at all. And that, see, if we're taken by a good angel, which is rare, or which is rare, but does happen, then it's different. Now we've got a guide, we've got protection, and we're supposed to be there. But those, in my opinion, those instances, very few, very far between, and it would be for a purpose which a person would come back and tell us about it. But those, I don't believe those. A lot of those type of encounters have happened with the regularity that we see with shamans and psychics and all this other stuff. So it gives you an idea of the times we're living in.
Of course, yes, sir, yes, sir. You know, and I just kind of wanted to get into this real fast because I find it fascinating, although it is a little bit off topic. But and you mentioned it in a small part, I think, in some of the interviews I've heard, as far as Nazi occultism and the Holocaust and how it has to do with sort of the UFO flaps that have come after it. You tied that together in a very interesting way, I thought. Could you go into that a little bit, maybe?
Yeah, I'd love to, and that's a good observation on your part. In Politics, Prophecy, and the Supernatural, we get into that the Holocaust is a German word which means offering a burnt offering on an altar, and that's exactly what we see happening in the concentration camps. It was a burnt offering of a blood sacrifice, which opened up a portal and allowed these demonic entities in. That's just why we see the Foo Fighters at the end of World War II running alongside the airplanes, and both the Allies and the Axis. Everybody didn't know what these things were, but the Americans called them Foo Fighters, and there's actually pictures of them, very grainy pictures, but there are pictures, and of course hundreds of people went on the record talking about these things. It's the birth of the modern UFO phenomena. And what that is, once again, it's allowing the fallen angels back into this dimension via the blood sacrifice of those who perished in the Nazi death camps. This is occult 101. The Mayans, where the 2012 calendar and all this stuff. What people don't tell us is that the Mayans practiced human sacrifice, as well as the Druids, by the way. And they would cut the heart. I don't get a little graphic, but they would cut the hearts out, and hold the beating heart in front of the victim's eyes as he was slowly passing away. He'd see his own heart right in front of him beating, and offered that to the gods. In fact, when the Spanish came over here, they were absolutely appalled. The temple room looked more like a butcher shop. They never see anything like it. I never saw anything like it. That's who the Mayan were. So consider the source of where 2012 is coming from. It is utterly occultic, utterly demonic in every possible way, and that's what we're looking at. And so the parallels there, it opens up a portal. This is what attracts, of course, ghosts, and a ghost is, in my opinion, is nothing more. It's not the deceased you're looking at. It's a disembodied entity, disembodied spirits of a Nephilim that were lost their true form during the flood of Noah thousands of years ago and now roam the earth. The guidebook tells us this very specifically. They roam the earth. They're also called demons. And you say, well, how does that work? Well, wherever blood is spilled, that's what attracts them. And they thrive off that fear. There's a sort of a psychic residue that remains in that place. And the demons will actually mimic the person who is killed there. Whatever, they will mimic it. Remember, these beings have a different perspective of time than we do. We're literally stuck in the space-time continuum. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. We can't go forward, we can't go back. We're stuck in the time-space continuum. These entities don't have total access to it, but they have a greater view than we do, a much greater view. They can flick, I don't know to what extent, but they can maneuver in it in a different way than we can. They're not totally omniscient. They can't see and know everything, but they move in time and can see further forward and further back than we can. An analogy would be if I'm in a cornfield. Corn grows about 8 feet tall when it's finished, right? 7 to 8 feet tall. I can see 15 feet in front of me. If I'm lucky, if I'm looking down the row, I can see a little further. Put me up on a ladder, right? A nice 12-foot ladder. Now I can see the whole field. Well, I can't see what's beyond the field, but I can see the field. Take me up in an airplane over the field, and now I can see a lot further. That's a good analogy of what I believe these entities are able to see further in time forward, further in time backward than we can. And that's why they're able to pose as, and have certain information that, it's a ghost of the Civil War guy. No, it's not. It's an entity masquerading as such,
Mhm.
and it thrives off of it. It they lie all the time. I can't stress it enough. Blossom Goodchild's a perfect example. She's got spirit guides. She's a channeler. And I interviewed her. She believes in the Federation of Light. She's still channeling, and they told her on October 14, 2008, to be a large mothership that's going to manifest. And she asked him innumerable times, "Are you sure?" She stuck her, head stuck her credibility out on a limb there, and went with it and blogged about it. And millions of people all across the globe were waiting for the October 14th when the UFO craft was going to materialize. Guess what? It didn't. And the next day she had egg on her face, and it got real nasty. A lot of people said some real nasty things about her. And I interviewed her about that, and she said, "Look, I asked these entities innumerable times, are you sure this is going to happen?" They reassured me it was going to happen. Well, they lie, and they lie all the time. And the father of lies, the guidebook of the supernatural, tells us exactly who the father of lies is. I mean, this is amazing. See, this is all. I keep going back to the guidebook because that's the source of all this information. People need to open it up and begin to plummet steps because it's incredible. Again, I'm not talking about religion. Open the guidebook of the supernatural. See what's there. The guidebook says that the father of lies is Satan himself. And when you lie, when a person lies, you obfuscate, you twist, you distort, you lead astray, you maneuver a person, manipulate a person away from that which is true. So we can all concur that lying is not a good thing.
Yes, sir. I just want to thank you so much for another brilliant appearance on the show. Before we go, is there anything you want to point our listeners towards it that they can check out, like your website, your books, what you have out right now?
Yeah, the best thing to do is to check the website, lamarzulli.net, lamarzulli.net. There's a whole store there. We've got wonderful DVD on the Shroud of Turin, which will make a believer out of you and clear up the idea of the carbon-14 dating, what the Shroud is. It's not a painting. We never got into that tonight, but that's okay. There's also a book or a DVD called The Bethlehem Star, which counteracts or is a rebuttal to the whole idea where Benjamin Creme and Maitreya are saying that the Bethlehem Star, it's a reemergence of this star, was actually a UFO 2,000 years ago. I've got news for you folks, it wasn't, and this DVD proves that. Fascinating DVD. And then, of course, we have my books there, the Nephilim Trilogy, which is right now out of print. We're trying to get more of them. But Politics, Prophecy, and the Supernatural, and, of course, the new paperback book, The Alien Interviews, all are available there. I blog 5 days a week, lamarzulli.wordpress.com, lamarzulli.wordpress.com, about a variety of subjects. Right now we were just talking about the Haiti earthquake this week and some other events. But, that's what the best place to go is the website because it's got links to the blog site, lamarzulli.net, lamarzulli.net.
And thank you very, very much for your appearance and donating your time to us tonight, sir. We greatly appreciate it.
Hey, it's great to be here.
Yes.
Bring me back again soon.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Take care.
Thank
You too.
Good night.
Night. And that was the famous L.A. Marzulli. He is a wonderful, wonderful guest.
Wow. He was one of the ones that I said, you know what, Jake's going to drive this one. This is it. I wanted to sit back and listen. Jake, you did a great job interviewing, and I hope all of our listeners see why I'm such a big fan of him and really believe in a lot of things that he say in regards to the UFO and what's out there. Just a awesome, awesome guest. I'm really happy and proud to have him on.
I can barely take credit for that one. He's such an easy interview.
Yeah.
It's very easy to get him on. Very interesting things. So, it's been a wonderful show. Yeah. Why don't we close it on a high note? Sean?
You can do a John Wesley's rule. Do all the good you can by all the means you can and all the ways you can and all the places you can as long as you ever can. Guys, we love y'all. I'm Sean Sellers with Jake Bell, Michelle Sellers, David Humphrey, SeanSellers.com, SouthernParanormalResearchers.org, live chat, website, SeanSellers.com, Wednesday nights from 9 on. Guys, we love y'all. Thank you so much for your support and friendship. Good night.